required that we say something awkward right as the actual stream starts. So
Yeah.
we have to make sure we do that.
Let's see. We have 0 people watching right now, which is a shame. But then again, it just started. Um, yeah, we definitely need to like figure out like a glow up picture for you. It's like a different kind of different kind of noodles and spaghetti. So,
Yeah.
do you have a publicly disclosable history behind why you decided on pasta and why you decided on that picture of pasta?
This picture, I don't think so. Um, when I back in the day, back when I was real young,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I left, and a lot of there really aren't many open Minecraft names, so I had
Mm-hmm.
to think of really hard, um, and pasta ended up being part of that name, and so that I just ended up kind of sticking with it. And then when I came into Dash, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't as much of a requirement. Like usernames were much more available in the Slack back in the day when I joined it.
Yeah.
And so instead of needing pasta, whatever, 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 and something really unique that I had for back in the day for Minecraft, I was able to just shorten it down to pasta.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where the name came from. I originally decided it back in the Minecraft days since that was one of my favorite foods.
Yeah.
Um,
Nothing wrong with the good old bowl
and
of pasta.
exactly, and it just kind of stuck. So
It is. It is as it is. Wow, we have 9 people watching already. Hey everyone, that was the pasta origin story. Glad you tuned in for it. See you guys next week. No, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna play the intro and we'll get going. So, hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Dash podcast. If you weren't around earlier, we did just wrap up the digital cash rundown, and now we're on to the Dash podcast with special, wonderful guest Pasta. And now, if you were not listening at the very beginning, you might have missed the origin story, right, of Pasta. Now, now is not the time to go back and look at that. You can do that later. But in the meantime, how's it going, man?
pretty good. It's nice Friday, Friday Dash podcast and after party day.
Yeah.
Just relaxing. It's a good time.
Yeah, it's all the above. It's particularly interesting. Like right now, the icy river is like melted. It's like summer t-shirt weather, but there's still ice in the river. So it's kind of fun having that juxtaposition. And
Yeah.
so for obviously anyone who watches the podcast should know who you are, or if they don't, they haven't been paying attention. But you develop for the core part of Dash, and just how's it been going? What you been working on lately?
Yeah. So it's been going well. So Core has been working on a lot of stuff recently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, really some of the big ticket items aren't super interesting. They're more kind of behind the scenes. And so we've been working a lot on some advancements that enable platform specific features that are necessary for platform to go to mainnet.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been really scoping out what proof of service will look like for platform related services, and how the proof of service of layer 2 of platform specifically will interact with the proof of service of layer 1 of core.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so there's a lot of specification going on right there, and figuring out how we want that to work, as well as some other nitty gritty kind of more behind the scenes crypto based changes that we needed for a platform to work. And I think actually we're going to be creating a dip on that soon. In fact, the dip might be public and up for review. I want to look and see, make sure I'm not lying to you guys. So yes, it's DIP 21. It's LLMQ DKG data sharing.
Okay.
And it gets kind of nitty gritty. It isn't too interesting, but it is necessary for a platform to be able to do what it needs to do. It's necessary for the validator rotation set for the validator rotation, validator set rotation in platform to work. And able to do that, you need to be able to get the public key shares of the quorum that you're like passing control onto. And so, you know, like I said, not super interesting, but very important so that platform actually is able to do validator set rotation. And then Eugene has also been, we've also been looking into, specifically Eugene has been looking into a modification to how Chainlocks works right now to make it even more secure. And right now, there are 24, there might be 12. I think there are 12 active quorums for Chainlocks.
Okay.
And for any given height, one of them gets selected basically randomly based on the height, though. And so at any given block height, only one quorum is responsible for the chain lock. But in really, really edge case scenarios, if you are assuming the masternode network is highly compromised, there could be problems with that if, say, if one quorum signs a block at height n, and then another quorum signs a conflicting block at height n+1. It really requires it requires malicious control of quorums, which is incredibly unlikely. But we're looking into ways to really kind of change the CL-SIG message to require a signature from the majority of Chainlock's masternode of Chainlock quorums. So again, something, you know, kind of nitty gritty, not super interesting. Like Chainlocks is still incredibly secure. It's just like increasing that security level even further if you assume a crap ton of masternodes are being held maliciously, which is a pretty difficult assumption to get to in the first place.
Yeah, but it is pretty fascinating to think about how quickly those assumptions of security can quickly change, right? So, for example, if you consider proof of work and several mining pools come under, you know, single control based on geographic area or something, all of a sudden you're like, oh, we have such a strong hash rate, can just not matter nearly as much. And of course, with exchanges and entities like that starting to have more and more coins there, especially because some things like Binance offer staking, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, there could be a bunch of masternodes owned by a potentially hostile actor, controlled by, who want to, you know, prove a point when Dash gets too uppity and, you know, about like, oh, more secure than Bitcoin or some nonsense. It's like, who knows? So definitely it's the kind of thing you need to be looking out for. So I'm very grateful that that's being worked on.
Yeah, it is very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It's and of course, like, one of those fascinating things to look at is the way different layers of network kind of interact with each other. And everyone is talking about, first off, for a while, everyone's talking about like what's going on in Dash. And then Evolution was this like super secret, whatever. And then, oh, platform's out. And then it's going to be a separate thing for plenty of reasons. Not the main Dash network, but of course it has to be interoperable with the regular Dash network in order to actually work. And it's always, I can imagine that could be an incredibly difficult task to get just right. And so, yeah, that's where the rest of this stuff comes in.
Yeah, it really is, because you have to you have to consider so many implications for any given feature. You have to consider what the privacy implications are. You have to consider what the scalability implications are. You have to consider the security implications. There's so much going on. And then when you get into, you know, layer to layer, you have to consider all of those factors on both layers and then look at it as a system altogether. And it definitely is there's a lot there in network architecture design.
Yes. So I'd like to remind everyone once again, we are streaming on Odysee, which is the library-based network as well. So if you get tired of YouTube, you go in the description. There's a link to the library live stream where you can watch. And also there's a live chat there too. I'm watching it all. And if you have questions for Pasta, throw them in either of those live chats. And if I'm ignoring them too much, or if you just want to go right there, go to cointr.ee/thedesertlinks and leave a little donation message. And then that will go into this live super chat thing I have right down here that is left over from last one that I will actually display on the screen. So if you want that extra attention, that's how you get it. So just thought I'd throw that one out there. Yes?
Is this the first Dash podcast where we are on Odysee live?
Yes.
Awesome.
This is historic. Cool. It is both that and the first day I have done back-to-back podcasts on this channel. Because I used to do every other week, was one of those. And then, now a lot of firsts, and we'll celebrate at the end for that. So hopefully for these, I need to get like a new butt pillow or something, because if I'm just sitting here for like hours and hours, and then there's the after party, it's more hours, and it could get a little exhausting in a certain way. John Morris, James.
Yeah, maybe a custom butt pillow would be good for you. Really get the perfect fit.
Molded to my unique shape. So we're talking about, the core things. Right now, the whole when Evo thing is in everyone's mind. That's what everyone wants to talk about. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's interesting that's not directly related to platform itself that is kind of more your domain here. So the one big thing I've noticed is PrivateSend has had an interesting place in Dash's history over the years, where it was no one cared about Xcoin. Let's be very clear about that. Then Darkcoin people cared about because it had this extra CoinJoin type feature, and it was the best in class kind of privacy to a certain extent, depending on who you're talking about. And for a while, it definitely was the leader of the privacy coin pack for just having this basic thing you could do on any other cryptocurrency, but in a very much more sophisticated and like built into the main wallet and using the proprietary network kind of thing. And then after like that move to Dash to try to be more than just we mix coins, then it's been an interesting relationship between digital cash for all kinds of things, not just privacy, and then to now, please don't call us a privacy coin, please don't delist us. And so in this entire story arc of things, first off, people have not noticed that there have been a lot of actual improvements to PrivateSend over the years. Do you want to just give a quick summary from what you remember, at least since you've been involved? Like, what have been some of the things that have been changed to make it better?
Yeah. So when I got started in Dash, really as a developer, the main thing that that I was interested in, the main thing that I looked into was PrivateSend. That's the big thing for me. And so I actually introduced a lot of changes over time to PrivateSend that we have rolled out and have been active on the network for quite a while at this point.
Yeah.
One of the first things that we did that I introduced was, and this was before I was working for Dash Core even, I just did this because I wanted to see it done, is I introduced a new denomination, the 0.0001 Dash denomination, I believe. And that ends up resulting in lower fees when you're sending with PrivateSend, because you can't have change. And so having that smaller denomination allows you to spend less in fees when you're sending. And so that was one of the first things that I did. The second thing that I did, or maybe it was the first, maybe I'm getting the order missed up, but
it's all right.
Very early on in my Dash career, before I was even working for Dash Core Group, is I introduced a pull request that changed the default number of rounds from 2 to 4. Initially, the default was 2, and although 2 is like fine, I don't know.
It's
It
not enough.
it can be a little lackluster. It's fine, right? Like if you're using 2, you just have to know what your security model is, and don't use 2 rounds and just expect everything to work magically and be 100% private. If you're only, you should use 2 or really 4 rounds for just, oh, I'm going out and I don't want, it's just a nice casual breaking of the transaction graph history. Whereas, and because of that, it's significantly cheaper in fees. But I wanted to increase that because a lot of people who, get into Dash, they download the core wallet, they see, oh, PrivateSend mixing, click, start, boom, good. And they think that's just perfect, and they don't realize that there are settings and options associated with it.
Yeah, it's customizable.
And that's one of the downsides of our system. Something like Monero, they pride themselves on being very difficult for the user to mess it up. And so, back
cut
in
it
the
off
day,
at difficult for the user.
well, that's very true too.
Yeah, there's that.
Right, but back in the day, Monero allowed people to, have a number of different ring sizes and stuff like this, and that allowed for like transaction profiling based on the number of rings that you're using and stuff like that. And they decided that they wanted to make it as difficult for someone to break their own privacy as possible, besides just publishing their view key. But of course they have a lot of trade-offs with that because they have a fixed ring size. It results in significantly higher transactions, all of that, and that's not even getting into like confidential transactions or whatnot. So that's their goal, is they want to make it very difficult to mess up. But Dash wants to be customizable. It wants to allow those different use cases. And so for some people, they just don't want the barista to see that they have a masternode. They mix 2 rounds, they're fine. They don't necessarily care too much if the IRS realizes that they have a masternode or whatnot. But other people are going to have different security models. They're going to care more about their privacy or less, and that's okay. People should be able to have different security models. And so for some people, 2 is good. Some 16 is perfect. But the default was 2, and that was just a little low. So I introduced that PR to increase it to 4. And I think that pull request also changed the maximum from 8 to 16.
Yeah, I remember that change. I was grateful for it as well.
Yeah. Later on, what was it? I introduced a pull request. I think this was once I was finally working as a contractor for Dash Core Group. And let's see. I believe this pull request, it introduced random participant count mixing.
Yeah.
Where, so back in the olden days, if you were doing mixing, it was always with 2 other people. There were always exactly 3 people in a mixing session. And that's good. Like, that's good, but it allows certain profiling because that there are 3 people involved in a mixing session.
Yeah.
And so you're able to do different assumptions and profiling. And so I introduced a change where the number of participants would be random between 3 and 5, up to the liquidity of the network. So if only 3 people are mixing on the network, well, then still those 3 people will be together and they'll continue to mix and be fine. But if 5 people are in the network, then sometimes 3 people will mix together, sometimes 4 people will mix together, and sometimes 5 people will mix together.
Yeah, breaking patterns.
Exactly. And so that was quite valuable. Later on, I introduced a pull request that changed the maximum number of participants from 5 all the way up to 20. And that's been active on the network for quite a while now. So when you're mixing, you could be mixing with 19 other people. And, there's no way for an outside observer to distinguish between a mixing with 3 people and with 9 people, or with 12 people, or with 15 people.
Yeah.
And so that really makes profiling and like statistical analysis much more difficult. And then now well, maybe it was in version 16. Maybe it's in version 17.
Mm-hmm.
I think version 16 has it. I introduced a feature called random round mixing.
Yeah, I
Um,
do notice that when I manually select my inputs when sending stuff.
hmm And so what happens is, uh, previously when you were doing analysis, like attacks on PrivateSend, you could assume that every output was mixed for the same number of rounds, and
Mm-hmm.
that made your attack significantly easier. Like it was still very, very difficult, but relatively easier. Um, but when you don't know how many rounds it could be, because a lot of times if you're an attacker, you can assume like, okay, maybe this person used 4 rounds, maybe this person used 8 rounds, maybe they used 16 rounds. You can kind of assume one of those. It's pretty normal,
Yeah.
and that's also one reason why when I mix, I don't necessarily use 16. Maybe I use 15 rounds and
Mm-hmm.
mix it up a little bit more, break your statistical, um, don't look like the normal person, even though, yeah.
Yeah.
So introduce random round mixing. So now if you set your round count to be 16, what actually happens is some number of your outputs mix for 16, and then another random number mix for 17, and then another random number mix for 18.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a exponential decay where it is certain that all of your outputs will be mixed for 16 rounds. It is pretty likely that they'll be mixed for 17. It is unlikely 18. It's almost never 19, but it still can happen, and then it will
Mm-hmm.
never happen for 20.
Yeah.
um because we set a max to be 3 additional rounds. And so with that, it increases your private anonymity set a little bit, because your average round count is going to be slightly higher. Instead of being
Mm-hmm.
16, it might be 16.5.
Yeah.
I did the math at some point, but I don't remember it. And additionally, it becomes so much more difficult for an attacker to try and trace back through the transaction graph when looking at a
Mm-hmm.
PrivateSend, because they can't just go back 8 and then try to find clusters.
Mm.
They have to go back, 8 for one input, and then 8 for another input, then 8 for the third input, and then try 9 for the fourth input,
Yeah.
and then try 10th for the fourth input. And they have to go through all of those combinations, and it just becomes exponentially more difficult to try and find clusters by tracing the transaction graph backwards.
Yeah. So it seems like
Um,
it's some significant, like very minor seeming improvements, but it seems like as far
mhm.
as the actual effect on traceability, it's been absolutely massive.
Yeah, it really has been. Going from increasing from 3 participants upwards, um, it really does increase your anonymity set. It goes from being, what is it? I think it goes from being 3 to the number of rounds.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you're doing 4 rounds, your anonymity set, roughly speaking, not exactly, is 3 to the 4.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have 4 participants, it increases that significantly if you actually run the math out. So that's a significant improvement on anonymity set, as well as the random round mixing really makes it much, much, much more difficult to do. I don't think there's a good name for it, but I guess I would call it like back tracing analysis.
Yeah.
Um, but it makes that so much more difficult, because you have to try all of those permutations or combinations of round counts.
So when we're talking about this, back in the day, CoinJoin was invented, and there was always been some like centralized tumblers or mixers where you send some guy your money and then they mix it around, you send it back, and those are always terrible. But
Mm-hmm.
to date, there's been quite a few improvements in the CoinJoin kind of world for privacy options for mainly for Bitcoin, I guess, because that's mostly what people use as far as like darknet markets and things, as far as I'm able to tell at the present day, even though Monero's made some headway into there. So obviously there's a bunch of different kinds of ways of doing CoinJoin. How many other implementations, if you know, I mean, I don't know how much you've been, I guess competition eyeing, but how many of
Mm-hmm.
these kinds of improvements are present, or how does all this kind of stuff stack up with other things? Like, let's just take, say, Cash Shuffle or Cash Fusion, one of those two Bitcoin Cash type mixing things. Obviously, they do mix, but do they do one round? Do they do 2 rounds? Do they like randomly select participants? Is it static? Do you know any of those kinds of details for some of the other systems out there?
Yeah, so there are a number of different systems, and all of them work, relatively differently. One of the biggest is for Bitcoin called Wasabi Wallet.
Yeah.
And so they have built-in mixing. And so there, instead of using... So one of the interesting things is that Dash's mixing protocol, unlike most other Bitcoin-based mixings, Dash allows the user to use multiple inputs and outputs for any mixing session. Whereas Bitcoin's Wasabi, you can only use one input, to my knowledge. I mean, I guess you could use multiple because there's no way for them to tell, but if you have one wallet open, it will only mix one at a time. And so with that, they calculate your anonymity set based on the number of other people that you mix with. And that's really easy to tell for them because one input corresponds to like one user. But in Dash, because people use multiple inputs and outputs, it's significantly, it's really kind of harder to do a direct comparison on anonymity set. And so with Wasabi, they allow you to, you select your coins based on,
Did you see this?
Yeah,
I
that's
got it.
fun.
Someone gave me a fun, happy donation. Thank you, Anonymous. And you're clearly very anonymous because you said, this PrivateSend input is mixed for 83 rounds. Interesting. So the single input for 83 rounds. I wonder how you have to be working on some special stuff for that, huh?
Yeah, probably. So it's simply a constant in Dash Core that we set the maximum as 16, and there's really no, it's not gospel. There's no reason that it has to be 16. The thought process is just that once you run the math out, at 16, it is so unlikely that there's no point to mix further than that. Besides to have a fun point and be able to say you mixed for 83 rounds. There's no real point. You're just going to be paying higher fees.
Yeah.
Although it does help network liquidity, so that's good and that's beneficial. But generally, we don't want people paying higher fees for no benefit. So we set a default maximum as we set the maximum to be 16. But if you want to compile your own version of Dash Core, it's a super simple modification. It's in I think it's in PrivateSend.h is the file, and it's like one constant. You just change it from 16 to 32, and it's good to go. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's pretty cool stuff. I saw, it's not showing up now, but there was another message from Anonymous. I'll wait until it pops in here to actually display it, but it said, the enemies of sound money will go after Dash, even if we rename PrivateSend to Dash CoinJoin. Changing my mind. That's a whole interesting topic and stuff. Let's get into that after finishing up this kind of base thing. So there's some fundamental, it sounds like the way PrivateSend is constructed is advantageous over a few different kinds of, CoinJoin that are out there right now. Now, what's most interesting is the Show Me on CoinJoin, which basically makes it so that, from my understanding, right, that the mixing node, whatever node helps coordinate the mixing, doesn't really have any meaningful information on the participants. And so that would be for example, Wasabi Wallet does that. Dash, the way Dash works now doesn't, but it's not seen as really that much of a problem because, you have let's just round up to 5,000 masternodes, right? You got a whole bunch of masternodes. They're all part of the Dash network. They all have 1,000 Dash staked behind them, basically. And like the odds of that being malicious, like a malicious node tracking stuff, is just like already so low that like why it's not that much of a problem. But Show Me on CoinJoin would make that like from a very, 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 very small chance to like a 0 chance, kind of. Is that a good understanding?
Yeah. So currently, when you do a single round of mixing, the masternode that you mix with is able to link your inputs and outputs. That's the only person who can.
Mm-hmm.
That masternode can link your inputs and outputs, and that's why in Dash we use multiple rounds, and that's why using multiple rounds is important. Because if you only use one round, it's not really secure. That masternode knows the linkage between inputs and outputs.
Mm-hmm.
So Chaumy and CoinJoin breaks that. It means that masternode can no longer link between your inputs and outputs. It's not. I've looked into it a lot, and it's one of the things that is on the backlog and one of the things that I want to implement. But it's not as trivial as it is in other systems,
Mm-hmm.
because in Wasabi, right, every participant sends one input and has one output.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's really there's no clustering that you're able to do based on input counts because all of them use one input.
Mm-hmm.
In Dash, we don't use equal number of inputs, and there's a really important reason for that I can maybe get into later if anyone really cares. But
Mm-hmm.
the gist is we can't use the same number of inputs. We could all use one input, but that will slow down mixing drastically, and we don't want to do that. And so what we need to do to enable to implement Chaumy and CoinJoin, we could implement Chaumy and CoinJoin naively today,
Mm-hmm.
but it would provide no real privacy benefits by just implementing Chaumy and CoinJoin.
Mm.
And the reason for that is if you have two participants, right, me and
Yeah.
Joel, and I have 3 inputs and I have 3 outputs, and Joel has 4 inputs and 4 outputs, the way that Chaumy and CoinJoin works is that you send your outputs, you send your inputs initially, and then they send you like a cryptographically garbled signature, and then you're able to unblind that, and then you send that unblinded signature with your outputs,
Mm-hmm.
and so the masternode is able, or the server is able to say, yes, this person did submit inputs, because it has the like jumbled signature, but it can't link between the inputs and the outputs because that signature was jumbled and then unjumbled and weirdness. Mm-hmm. However, in our case, right, I submit 3 inputs, you submit 4 inputs, then I submit 3 outputs with a blinded signature,
Mm-hmm.
and you submit 4 outputs with a blinded signature. Even though, the server operator can't technically trivially link between the inputs and the outputs,
Mm-hmm.
realistically he can, because he can look at the grouping and see, oh, 3 goes to 3, 4 goes to 4.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, those are the same person, and link between inputs and outputs. And so what needs to happen is there needs to be a way to communicate to the server securely and privately, so that you can do multiple sessions, basically. And you would do multiple sessions at the same time. Basically, you would do 1 input, 1 output. Just you would do that like 10 times if you wanted to do 10 inputs and 10 outputs.
Mm.
And so the way that, in order to get here, one of the routes that I have investigated and I've looked into is having masternodes run a hidden service.
Okay.
And so a hidden service is like what you see on, like it's how you connect to like servers over Tor. And so a lot of times the point of a hidden service is the person behind it wants to stay anonymous.
Yeah.
There are actually changes that we can, there's a specific flag that we can set in the config that basically tells Tor, hey, we don't care about being anonymous ourselves, so speed up this transmission, and we're not going to be anonymous. We just want a secure connection where the user is anonymous. And and that's what Facebook's onion address actually did.
Hmm.
And it's called, oh, I forget what it's called. Tor. I can't remember it. I wrote it down somewhere. It's in one of my documents, and I have like a almost dip like it.
Yeah.
I have an almost dip on this and how this would work. But basically, every masternode would run this server that is listening over the Tor network, and this is fine because like they're not being hidden. In fact, your connection doesn't even look like it just looks like HTTPS data. It doesn't look anything weird. No VPS provider is going to flag it as you hosting something. It looks totally fine. But that will enable users to connect to the masternode over multiple different connections, and then Charmian blinding has a real effect. And so that's something that I've been looking into and really, really, really want to implement because it'll be, it's just really good. But realistically, the privacy benefit isn't huge.
Yeah.
But the workload is relatively high. And so it's on the backlog, but it just hasn't gotten highly prioritized at this point. So.
Yeah. So would you consider the present state of Dash mix transactions to be competitive or superior with what's mostly available out there for other chains?
Yeah, I think it's highly competitive at the very least. I think it's probably superior, but I don't know all of the intricacies of their systems. And so there are trade-offs with any different approach. Obviously, using Wasabi, you're going to pay a crap ton of fees, and so from my perspective, that's a huge negative.
Of course.
But other people might not see that as a huge negative and might be okay with that. So it all depends on your perspective, but it's at least highly competitive, arguably superior.
And at least using it in, like even in networks like Bitcoin Cash that don't have those insane fees, you still have to pay mixing fees, right? I mean, whereas the Dash ones are free.
So the Dash ones are not free. There is a fee associated with it that covers basically block usage.
Yeah, the collateral payment thingy.
Yeah, it is quite low.
Yeah, and so the fact that now like Electra Mobile, you can mix on mobile now as well. And so that's one thing that's like now you can kind of have a universal payment experience. Now, as far as, because the whole mixing system does make things more complicated for the end user, and it basically means that the average newbie user will never do anything with mixing, pretty much, just because it's like, oh, well, I gotta like hit a button and then it mixes, and then I gotta wait. Oh, I don't want to wait. And then when you send it, there's like other complications. Like, for example, I remember I did one transaction one time because I was trying to like pay a specific amount, and it just just automatic, and it had the little warning of like 10 inputs are over. Warning, this thing will take like 93 inputs or something. I'm like, Jesus, whoa. Like, and always in the back of my head I'm thinking, when Evo, but like, what happens, how does privacy look like in a username based world where we kind of move on to that stuff? And so it seems like relatively easy to just have like a mixing in the background thing going on a side pocket of the wallet when you're doing username to username. One of the most annoying things is when I'm trying to send an entire, like a certain amount to an end destination. But because for privacy reasons, I don't want to have a big cluster of over 10 inputs. And so then it's like, all right, well, I have to like request an address, like 5 or 8 different addresses from the end, and then just individually construct smaller transactions to each one just to be extra careful. Now, what do you think are the possibilities? You could have a username-based Dash wallet that if you decide to send, let's just say I want to send like a certain amount to a friend, and it automatically limits it at under 10, like 9 inputs. It caps it at 9 inputs. And so it automatically requests several different addresses from them and sends a transaction in under 10 input pieces until it's completed, and just kind of like sends several in a row rather than just one payment.
Yeah.
First off, how difficult is that to do? And second, would that, because it's, because of the, I guess, the predictability that you're trying to send this to the same person, would that actually end up harming the privacy it's trying to gain by not using 10 inputs?
Yeah, you would have to think about the system a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You would want to ensure that so one thing is when using DPNS and sending to a name with platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's non-interactive. It's completely non-interactive. You have unlimited number of addresses at hand for that other person, because you can just derive new addresses for them, and they have the private keys to them that they can access.
NFT is just a unique digital item.
It would be easy to just send them, multiple transactions.
Mm-hmm.
You would probably want to think about the system a little bit, and probably you would probably want to make the transactions look more legit. For example, if I'm sending a bunch of funds to Joel, and I have, say, I have 12 1- denominations that I'm sending, and I have 3.1- denominations, right? And that's what I'm sending. You wouldn't want to send one transaction with 9 1- inputs, and then another transaction with the remaining. You would want to try and mix them together to make it look more genuine and legit. Even then, there are going to be some privacy implications there. Like if you send them to someone and then they combine them immediately after, well, it's kind of obvious looking at that transaction history that all of your inputs probably came from the same those two PrivateSend transactions probably came from the same person. As well as you want but the gist of it is, I don't think it would be too difficult. There would be a couple of things that you would have to think about as to how you would do it well. I would love to see PrivateSend support on the official mobile wallets. I know the mobile teams are super busy right now, and Quantum Explorer is probably going to hate me for saying it, but I really, really, really want them to implement some kind of, PrivateSend or mixing CoinJoin support. Because I think that will drastically make it easier for people to use, Dash mixing and CoinJoin outside of the core wallet and from your desktop. But
yeah. So first off, I think that that's great. Privacy is a human right and all that kind of stuff. But of course, the bigger challenge, of course, the small challenge is developer bandwidth. How many people do you have working on it? How many people can work on it versus on other things? What's the budget like? That's a concern, but it seems like something that can be fixed. But the more prickly thing is, of course, priorities based on regulatory stuff. So because Dash has these features which are on Bitcoin and other things like that, because it has it built into the protocol to a certain extent and into the official wallets, that has caused some, and because, more importantly, because of the branding back in the day, that has caused Dash to be called something called like an AEC, anonymity enhanced cryptocurrency, or a privacy coin, is stuff like Cointelegraph likes. Although they did call it payments-based coin in their last article, which is thanks Cointelegraph, you're learning. Basically, because of that stuff, there's been a lot of talk about Dash is not a privacy coin, don't delist us. Well, why does he have a thing called PrivateSend? It's just hard to come back from that. And so because of that, there's been discussion about changing the actual branding and name, not really doing anything about the actual thing, but changing the branding to something other than PrivateSend. So first off, how are discussions going on that? Do you have any kind of update on where that's going as far as the branding?
So it is our intent at this point to debrand PrivateSend within the core wallet. And just replace it with CoinJoin and mixing.
Mm-hmm.
All of the feature set remains exactly the same. Version 17 should include a couple of enhancements to PrivateSend, although nothing super fun.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple of relatively minor improvements, if I remember my change list correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But we are going ahead with the debranding of it, and that is planned to be done in version 17. And in fact, there is a pull request open right now. So if anyone wants to go review that pull request and look at some of the verbiage that we're using, that might be beneficial. Really, what it comes down to is that it's really a problem of communication. Initially, when Ryan brought this up internally, I really wasn't a fan. I thought that's a stupid idea. Why are we just pandering to the government people? They're not going to change. They're still going to come after us.
Mm-hmm.
What's the point? It doesn't do anything. But what I kind of learned talking more about it and thinking about it more is that the problem isn't that regulators understand the technology and that they dislike the technology. The problem is that they hear the word privacy and they get really, really scared.
It's the P word.
From what I've heard, is that privacy, the word private, when translated into like Japanese, has an incredibly negative connotation. It has the connotation of like anonymous, backstreet alley, I'm
might as well be
gonna
Yakuza.
kidnap your daughter kind of thing. And because of that, whenever you say PrivateSend, they just get really scared and they don't like it.
Yeah.
And so what I've heard internally is that what happens is they go to these regulators, especially in Japanese and these other Asian countries, and they talk about the entire feature list. They talk about what PrivateSend actually does. They compare it to Bitcoin. They compare it to other cryptocurrencies that have very, very similar feature sets. And they explain it all. And then at the end, they say, well, then why is it called PrivateSend? And to me, that doesn't make any sense. Like PrivateSend, okay, I'm sending something privately. Like it makes complete sense to me. But when translated, it has that incredibly negative, illegal type connotation. And that's the big problem, is that connotation and that understanding from other people.
Yeah.
So
might as well just call it Yakuza Send at this point, right?
Sure, whatever that means.
It's like, the Japanese mafia,
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. It's like, might as well call it Mobster Send or like Dirty Drug Money Send or whatever. So does it mean
exactly?
Does it have these same connotations in other languages, or is that the one that causes most of the problems, or is it just a few like Korea as well?
My understanding is it's really just. It's really centered in the Southeast Asia, so that Japanese, Korea. I'm not super involved in those discussions or anything, so this is pretty well secondhand knowledge. But yeah, my understanding is Japan and Korea are the main problems, I guess. And so, we know that this feature set is critically important. It's the whole reason why I'm in Dash. And it's critically important as it is, like, you cannot have digital currency ability. It cannot happen. And so because of that, PrivateSend is not going anywhere as a feature. It, mixing is staying in the core wallet, and it's going to be there as long as I have any say on what happens at Dash Core. But really, it's about changing the name so that we don't have that incredibly negative connotation, and so that we can be involved in those markets, and so that we're not lumped in with the Monero types. But
yeah. Now, that based on how this has been going so far, I don't think we'll have time for the whole Nano discussion about Nano had a big nasty spam attack and stuff. But one thing that is worth noting about that stuff is, so we're talking about UTXO based cryptocurrency, Dash, where you get a new address every time for privacy reasons, and that's still not enough for digital cash reasons. We need to actually explicitly mix in order to, protect basic user privacy from, basically having their funds tracked and get their house robbed or something. Now, it's worth noting that one of the things that Nano does, just like Ethereum and other things, is they're account-based cryptocurrencies, meaning you don't have a new address every time. There's just one address, and that's your balance on your address. Now, can you imagine that? That's like the old school days when I had one Bitcoin address that I used, And can you imagine, then it's like literally, you don't have to have any technical knowledge at all. You don't have to be like, all right, let me see if I can correlate some of this stuff and watch where the inputs go. It's like, no, you just see, where did I get the money from? Oh, from this address. This is how much money the guy has. Go hit him over the head. And so it's kind of worth noting that everything, it's not just, well, why remove it? What do you even need it if you're mainstream adoption? It's like, well, if you cut corners are cut, right? You cut enough corners and the whole ship sinks. So, yeah, I just thought that would be worth throwing that thing out there.
Yeah, that is a good point.
So, because of all, I'm just going to go in priority list of things now. The next thing in terms of priority thing was the whole trustless masternode shares thing. And of course, there's a million other fun, juicy subjects like NFTs and StakeHound, DeFi, and all this stuff. But trustless masternode shares are something that all the Dash community people really want, and all the newbies who are just looking into it say, where can I stake Dash? Oh, I want to just stake not on an exchange, and stuff like that. And it's like a very big kind of subject, and it's also one where you actually have some, I would say, some stuff that people might not know. So, first off, what is the likelihood, do you think, that trustless masternode shares can be created in any kind of a user-friendly sort of a way?
Well, user-friendly sort of the way is the hardest part about answering a question is defining the terms.
Mm-hmm.
And so figuring out what is an acceptable user experience or not is really the most difficult part of that.
Of course.
Because right now there are trustless shared masternodes on the network right now. I know firsthand. I designed the specification that ended up getting deployed. It very much so exists, and a number of people are using them. The main difficulty comes in the usability side and the ease of use setting it up. And so that is gonna, my understanding, I've talked with the CrowdNode people a bit about this, and I shared my specification with them and everything like that. And my understanding is that they are heavily looking into this. It is incredibly unlikely that in the near future it'll be possible for, one Dash trustless masternode shares, just because the hassle is too high on it. But for relatively large holders, I would say above 100 Dash, I would not be surprised if they have a solution that is quite user-friendly and completely trustless minus the payouts. So the payouts at this point can still be, stolen effectively by the person in charge of running the masternode or whoever gets... not technically. You could set your payout address to be some multisig or some script. And so it could be a requirement that all of the participants have to agree in order to payouts. But that gets kind of annoying.
Payout.
Yeah. And so, there are benefits and costs that you can kind of balance on it that make it either more user-friendly or more completely secure. I think most of the deployed nodes use a centralized person as the payout. So they receive the payouts, they do the accounting, and then they send out to the individuals of the share. But your actual portion of your actual masternode share itself, the 100 Dash that you put into the masternode, that is always trustlessly secure, and not even if every other participant colluded against you, you still couldn't lose your funds.
Yeah.
But really making it usable is the difficult part. I think it's possible. I would not be surprised if CrowdNode is able to figure something out that works pretty well. But it's not going to be as easy as go on CrowdNode, send to an address. It's going to be a little bit more complicated than that because you are controlling your own funds, you're controlling your own keys. And anytime you do that, it introduces a higher level of complexity.
Yeah, like as long as it's some sort of an easy wizard style setup, like back in the old days of the Copay wallet, when you're setting up a little multi-sig wallet with a bunch of people, it was pretty straightforward, you know? Even though multi-sig on its own is just more complicated, just the process was relatively okay. And as long as it's something like that. Now, the payout thing, the whole having to do a decentralized payout thing, that's kind of the sticking point, right? As far as doing like a multi-party payout.
So I didn't fully hear your question, but multi-party payouts are in the works.
Yeah.
There's actually a concept, a specification open on the incubator, where we are looking for people to work on this. I think there was some movement on that this morning that I haven't gotten up to date on in the incubator. But if you're someone that's interested in this, if you want to look into it and work on improving trustless masternodes, definitely take a look at the incubator and look at the concept for multi-party payouts. It's not too complicated, but basically what it would be is it'd be a modification to DIP 3. Right now, if you do a masternode, you can set an operator reward. And so basically it would be extending that to allow multiple so right now you can do basically 2 payout addresses. You can do a payout for yourself, and then you can do a payout address for the operator, and you can set some percentage to the operator.
Yeah.
Basically, it would do the similar logic to that. It would just extend, instead of having a single payout address for your masternode, you could have multiple, and you could specify percentages on those. So if you're interested in that, definitely look at the incubator and the concept associated with it, and you might be able to earn some Dash.
Yeah, and so then the other part that is just always going to be very difficult to figure out in a completely decentralized way is the running of the node itself. You still need a single, I guess, node operator to do that. Is that correct?
Yeah, you do.
And so basically, whenever you're going to form a trustless masternode and shares situation, you kind of want to identify people, hopefully people you trust to a certain extent. But basically, you don't need to trust with your money, though, to be very clear. But you want to identify some people ahead of time, and then you want to construct it. It's not so much like you just open a wallet and just start dumping into the shares pocket.
Yes, exactly. And that's one of the problems that I have with a more generalized approach to masternode shares, where you basically just, say you like send a transaction signaling that I want my Dash to be staked to a masternode, is you don't know who's operating it. You don't know who's in charge of those keys. And that becomes a problem, and it could allow people to, a malicious operator to get more masternodes than they should be able to get. You really should trust the person that's running your masternode. Preferably it's one of you. It's one of you who's in the masternode, and it's one of you that's actually has Dash behind it. But otherwise, it should be an operator that you trust and has a good track record.
Yeah, and I guess that's where CrowdNode and things like that come into it, is as a reputable company of sorts, then as the person that runs the node is that party, and then their customers together. That kind of makes it for someone who knows zero about Dash to be able to just like get in there and like participate. Or of course, just give it to them directly, let them be custodians of your funds and take all those, risks of going moo cow and boom, like as that were. Yeah, it seems like, and now I think it's funny that you mentioned like about who's running the node and the security risks and stuff. that kind of reminds me of the nano system. Now, maybe I'll just do the whole like nano divulge right now. So first off, the way Nano does the way they do their security model on as far as who's running the nodes is something that's very, I would say, user friendly on the basic user end, where you just say, I get this stake, and it's so easy. Although you don't get any money from staking with Nano, by the way. You just like pledge to support a node. Basically, anyone can run a node, but only nodes with a certain amount pledged behind them, like staked behind them more or less, actually matter in the consensus and as the security model. And so anyone with a Nano wallet can then pledge to just a list of nodes, and Nano Norway, I like these guys, let's throw them behind them. And then that's kind of how it works. So it is like a staked model, kind of like a proof of stake ish, except that the people actually running the thing don't have to have, it's like delegated proof of stake basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
I think that's exactly what it is, right?
Yeah. It's funny because, like, as I mentioned, like, everyone's trying to do things differently all the time. Like, oh, our thing is better, or no, none of these problems. And it reminds you of that, like, astronaut, like, looking at Earth with the guy behind him with the gun meme. It's just like, wait, it was all DPoS? It always was. Like, it just circles back to delegated proof of stake. It's so, I like that model as far as if you just wanted people to stake Dash, right? But the problem is, of course, people could spin up a bunch of nodes and then put cool names behind them and say, oh, yeah, I'm this guy. And then one or a few actors could just control a ton of the network without actually having any stake behind it. And that could be a big problem. But Nano has another problem running from it, which is they had a spam attack, which is supposed to not happen. But basically, they had a big spam attack because you don't need to actually pay any money to send a transaction. No fees. And so because of no fees, one corner you had to cut is spam attacks. Everyone has to do a little bit of proof of work to send a transaction. Everyone has to do a little proof of work to receive that transaction. But apparently there's ways of just... the cost of that is not too high to where you can't just like make the whole network inoperable because of that. And also the no fee corner cut that we had with the security model means that now you don't actually pay people like with masternodes. You pay masternodes to run a robust as hell network. And if you don't, well, you can run into some of these kinds of things. So it's pretty fun. Someone actually had a question about this, which is, I know it's maybe a stupid question, but will Dash fees always stay low? Even if someday Dash will cost less than, like, say, $2,000, will the fees still be like today? Because the gas fees are insane on Ethereum. So basically, Dash is cheap enough today that we don't care that we have to pay for things. But what do you think about long-term scaling? Will Dash always be relatively inexpensive to use?
Yeah. So basically, yes. The answer is basically yes. And the reason why we're able to do that is exactly because we have incentivized nodes. The problem with scaling Bitcoin or Ethereum by just pumping up the block size is because, or in Ethereum, the gas limit, is because the vast majority of their nodes are just volunteers. They just like the project, or maybe they're exchanges, but they don't have an incentive to actually have a robust operational node. Whereas with Dash, if your node falls behind, it is very, very possible that you get proof of service bumped. It's not a guarantee, but if your node is too slow, it's very possible that you get proof of service bumped and you get kicked off. And so because of that, you are incentivized to have you're incentivized to have a good enough, node. And so as the block size increases, as more transactions are used, that will incentivize masternodes to get better hardware that can then support more transactions. And there will be things that we have to do, like different scaling properties different scaling enhancements that we need as we see higher transaction counts. But generally, yeah, fees should remain low in Dash because of our incentivized node structure.
That's one thing that whenever I really love doing this, like dive into Nano type thing, because whenever you look into, like, I don't believe anything in life really exists out of context. Everything is in the context of its opposite. And he's saying like, no fees, everything's free. And you're like, why didn't I think of that? Wouldn't it be great? And it's like, well, okay, well, what are we actually paying for anyway that we don't maybe need to be paying for? And it's like, oh, okay, an actual like, robust infrastructure, robust security system, something that just works. And otherwise, you have to do everything yourself, which is a non-monetary way of paying for things. So, yeah, that is what it is. We were talking a lot about NFTs on the other podcast, right? So, not you and I, but I was. First off, what do you think of the prospects for NFTs on Dash? I know that there are some, I've heard there are some on Bitcoin Cash today, where I guess they use the opcodes to then store some extra, information and stuff in there. But have you given much of a thought towards NFTs on Dash?
So I think is it Cloud Wheels or maybe README? Probably Cloud Wheels on the incubator, who's basically doing NFTs he's using NFTs in the context of like Minecraft, I think is his application for it at this point. And so I haven't looked too much into it, honestly, but it definitely does seem very possible. I mean, if it's possible on Bitcoin Cash, it's incredibly likely that it's possible on Dash at this point.
Yeah, probably in a different way, though. Like, not maybe in a... Like, I wonder how the token would be created. Like, it would be associated with on-chain transactions like usual, or would it be like a platform chain thing? I wonder.
Yeah. That would probably depend on the purpose that someone wants. Generally, the layer 1 chain is going to be more robust, and you're going to have instant send capabilities, whereas layer 2, you're going to have lower fees and not necessarily as it's not as permanent almost. You're able to do pruning and everything like that. So yeah, it depends on probably the purpose that the person has, whether they would want that NFT to be on platform or on the core layer. So
yeah, the one thing I think is interesting is depending on who issues the NFTs and how they're created. Like, you have an NFT which is like a token with a bunch of metadata, and part of that is an image file usually, or almost invariably, but it could be other things. And the file, some of these issuers have centralized storage for where the file is actually stored. Other ones use IPFS or something like that. Now, is this something where Dash Drive could be used to like store the actual file behind the NFT so that the entire thing is a self-contained Dash NFT, or would that maybe not be desirable?
I don't think that would be desirable. Dash Drive isn't intended to store large bits of data like that. Right? Even with username images in DashPay, those images aren't stored on chain, and it's just because it doesn't make sense to. Instead, what you do is you store a commitment to it, right? You store a hash of it. There's no reason to store 500, 50. There's no reason to store 5,000 copies of this image, if not more.
Yeah, of
if
course.
You can just store 5,000 copies of this super tiny hash and then have it hosted on GitHub Pages or whatever, wherever you want, and you can still assert that the value is correct, and anyone that wants to retain possession of it can, have a copy of it. But yeah, I don't think it makes sense to put that on Drive itself, because you would just be duplicating it everywhere.
Yeah. Now, the important thing about NFTs is, I mean, other than just NFTs and like what do they do? But the important thing about it is ownership and transfer of ownership, where it's not just, I created a token. It's like, okay, do you want to sell it? Because then how does that mechanism work and things like that? And I think it's pretty being able to do this username to username to where you can actually like, in a very user-friendly kind of a way, just like have all your NFTs in your wallet and just send it to another user, and not like, this is my big long Ethereum address and all that kind of stuff, the way it works. So definitely I would say that NFTs would be some kind of a huge thing with Dash. So What was the other thing we were looking at? I'm just going to open the message I sent to you so I know we're covering all the bases because there's always other stuff to talk about. But, yes, the StakeHound / DeFi. So, first off, how familiar are you with the whole StakeHound thingy and DeFi?
I'm probably more familiar with DeFi than I am StakeHound. I haven't used DeFi at all at this point. I guess BISC technically counts as DeFi, but I've used BISC a little bit, but I haven't used any Ethereum or other smart contract based DeFi at this point.
Yes.
Just because fees have been too high for me. Although I am interested in it and I want to, but fees are just keeping me away right now.
Well, so a couple of notes on that. So first off, is BISC at all usable these days? I used it way back in the day when they first rebranded to BISC, and it was just a garbage user experience. And is it any better
it really
now?
hasn't gotten any better.
I'm sorry.
No, it still sucks. Yeah, I used it a couple of times, then I gave up on it because the UX was terrible and it had Bitcoin fees and it was just bad. But
yeah, as these things tend to go. Now, as far as you're saying, like Ethereum fees. Now, Ethereum is, of course, the gold standard of DeFi right now, but it's not that. It's not the only thing. So, for example, obviously there's like the Binance Smart Chain and their Pancake Swap, or whatever the hell they call that. I don't really trust that, so I wouldn't use that. But in addition to that, I know there's like Pangolin Dex, which uses the Avalanche network, which, as far as I know now, is very scalable and has no fees or very low fees. So I don't know. That could be a thing that even if fees are stopping you from looking into it, yeah, that could be a thing.
Interesting.
So, StakeHound. I'll just go into StakeHound, and then you can kind of help with a little bit of the extra DeFi specific kind of stuff. Hilawi says, Q fees are too damn high meme. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So, StakeHound is a company that basically offers a wrapped Dash kind of a product, where basically you want to do extra cool shit with Dash. So, you give them your Dash. Of course, you KYC first, right? Because they're going to be custodians of your Dash. You give them your Dash, and you get ST Dash on a 1-to-1 ratio back. So you give them, like, let's just, for the convenience of it, say 1,000 Dash. You give them a whole masternode worth. You KYC for that. You give them the whole 1,000 Dash. They give you 1,000 ST Dash. And they give you the majority of those master rewards, which you would be giving. They give you those back in ST Dash, which is an Ethereum token, right? And so basically what that allows you to do is now you get to just keep getting mastered rewards on your Dash, or most of them rather, and then you get to go play the DeFi games, which, for example, you get to put them up as liquidity on other things, and, like, for example, on Uniswap. And then basically what that allows you to do is to, like, sort of double dip on your Dash and engage in all the DeFi gambling type stuff at the same time as you're still getting your Dash kind of rewards. So, I mean, first off, that sounds both really cool and not my thing at the same time. And I don't know. What do you think about the possibilities of that? Like being able to have wrapped or ST Dash that then you can play around with. What kinds of stuff could you do with ST Dash?
Yeah, so obviously one of the big things right now is you can do the liquidity providing, where you provide liquidity on something like Uniswap or SushiSwap, or I don't know how these people came up with these names. That's a tangent though.
Yeah.
I don't see myself using using StakeHound Dash at this point, just because I don't see myself doing KYC like that.
Yeah.
However, I could see it being quite valuable, where in theory someone should be able to, if they have Ethereum, they might be able to, swap it for ST Dash and get masternode rewards and everything, and do whatever they want while still holding that ST Dash, and then they'd be able to swap it back for Ethereum and then just take it out, and there should be no KYC or anything there, to my knowledge. not fully sure how that works or what that how that really works.
Yeah, so it's a kind of interesting thing because I guess a lot of people now what I don't know is if you can do this kind of stuff on L2, you know, like on other layers where you don't have to pay those horrendous fees. Because like right now it's like, oh yeah, you can take your horrendous, you know, it is good because it is sort of a trustless masternode share type of a thing for some people, right? Because you swap, let's just say Ethereum for
well, it's about as trustless as Tether now. Let's remember that.
Yeah. That is true, but it's like it's a no KYC masternode share kind of a thing, I guess. In that if you have Ethereum, you want to swap it for ST Dash, then now you have like recurring rewards on this Dash denominated stablecoin type thingy, and you don't have to do KYC to do that. Someone, in order to make the whole thing, had to, but anyway, it's kind of an interesting thing. Like the problem is like I have a hard time looking at the possibilities unless they're at scale. And like right now I'm just thinking about like, what if I have like, you know, 4 to 5 Dash worth of Ether floating around there rather than just swapping them to Dash? What if I swapped them for ST Dash and I got some recurring rewards on them for a while? And it's like, yeah, okay, great. Even though I spend half of it in fees. So no. Now,
yeah, I am, although, you know, StakeHound might not like me saying this, but I am excited for like a Ren Dash. That would be really cool, and I do believe that is
being worked on.
Yeah. I'm not sure what its status is, but I do know people are looking into it.
So, what would Ren Dash be for the viewers at home that don't know anything about this?
So, Ren Dash is it is a trustless. To my understanding, it's trustless or relatively trustless setup where you can send your Dash, basically do a script that is controlled by a very large validator set. And then they issue Ren Dash on Ethereum. And so it's just a much, much more trustless setup compared to something like StakeHound.
Yeah, so, but do you get master rewards on that or not? I'd think no.
You would not.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Yeah, and so for people who are just pure DeFi, it seems like a better option that they're just like, okay, well, I get to take my Dash and I get to turn it into like some kind of a Dash that I can like, you know, swap all these swap services, basically non-centralized exchange day trade. And it seems like that's pretty straightforward. Now, the next level people who, you know, don't mind going through the KYC stuff, it's kind of like you get paid off for giving your information in getting kind of recurring master rewards on the thing. The fact you could double dip seems pretty cool to a certain extent, right? Because people always want like extra money on stuff. And I remember there were people who were saying, who had back in the day, do you remember way back in the day during like the 2017 initial stages of the bull run when Dash hit $100 for the first time? Then Roger Ver loaned someone like $100,000 worth of Dash because they were going to short it Dash, and then Dash went to the moon after that and they got wrecked. And Roger said the guy didn't pay back the loan, you know. But so like back in the day, I remember back then lending Dash, because I guess so many people were like gambling with it on exchanges. Back in the day, the loan rates, the interest rates you'd get on loaning out your Dash on exchanges were so high that people were just like doing that instead of doing a masternode. And even though there was a lot greater risk, it was like, well, you know, what could we do? And as far as I know, that's not quite the case anymore, or it could be. I haven't checked. But being able to double dip on that, where you do that and get master rewards at the same time, kind of. Although that's obviously gross oversimplification, but that could be a cool thing where now it's just like you have it's like the Doge meme with like the jacked Doge and then the skinny like weak one. It's like, you know, the skinny weak one is like the USD savings account. I get like almost no interest. It doesn't even keep up with inflation. And then the jacked Doge is like I get like I get sound money that I get master rewards on, and I get like, liquidity provider stuff on, just like a nice double stack thing, which would be interesting if you can,
What would
yeah.
be interesting to see is that if, right, let's assume StakeHound gets fully set up and good, and then Dash gets fully set up and good.
Mm-hmm.
It would be interesting to see if ST Dash trades at a premium to Dash, right? Because if you think about it, right, some people might want to, convert Dash into Dash and then buy ST Dash with their Dash. And so if more people want to buy it, then people are putting in via, the KYC system, that might cause ST Dash to actually trade at a premium and kind of incentivize people to like do the KYC and put Dash in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know how that'll work, but
yeah, that would be fun. I am very fascinated with the way markets trade and give premiums or discounts based on different factors that we might not necessarily think about. Like, for example, on these P2P type exchanges, like I'm sure on like BISC and on probably local cryptos and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure that stuff, it trades at a premium because it's private, because you don't have to go through an exchange. And what I wonder is when an exchange is going to be the discount rather than just like the baseline. But it's like the same thing about like, is ST Dash going to trade at a premium because you get some more money out of it, because you get the masternode rewards portion of it, or is it going to trade at a is it going to trade at a discount because of the KYC involved? You can't really, if you just get it from nothing, you can't just get Dash out of ST Dash unless you already KYC'd and put it in. And or is it going to balance out to a certain extent and be the same price, or is it going to be, it's traded a premium but a less premium than you would think because there's the extra risk associated with the centralized aspect of it. So that's funny to think. I can't wait. I can't wait to see how it actually trades.
Yeah, I'm really excited for both Dash and ST Dash, although I'm probably a little bit more excited about Dash, but definitely both of them are good forays and good things to have happening.
Yeah. We did get a question in the comments, which I'm seeking to address, that just says, how do I get Dash t-shirts like yours? I'm in UK. None? Okay, well, and you got another super chat as well to address. If I'm just real quick verifying that this is still the case, but if you go to satoshigoods.com or .de if you're in the DE part of the world, they have a bunch of crypto clothing stuff, and I believe they have some Dash. I believe they have some Dash stuff. In fact, let me actually just verify. This exact design, though, I have not seen it anywhere else because I got them all made. We had, what is it? I made 500 of these, and just the basic Dash logo on like a black t-shirt. And as far as I know, there's a few different kinds of those. I've seen, what's his name? Rodrigo with a kind of them on. But as far as I know, satoshigoods.com is the best place to go find, the Dash shirts. Let me just make sure they have other stuff. There's some weird together artwork thingy. Actually, might as well drop. Yes, this would be the place too. They even know some vintage Dash Embassy things, which doesn't, and they have a hashtag Stay Dashy as well. That's pretty funny. Yeah, so there's some cool stuff there. So why don't we start wrapping this thing up? Let me refresh the CoinTree thing doesn't update automatically anymore, so I have to like manually restart the browser. But let's take care of this one and then talk about community development opportunities. Okay, Anonymous says, oh wait, it's not Anonymous. Ash Francis says, great podcast. Thank you very much, Ash. You're a gentleman and a scholar and a good drinking buddy, but let's not go there. So where can people go to get involved in Dash development? Because we're talking about these things like the multi-party masternode payout, and we're talking about the Ren Dash integration. All this stuff is being done by the Dash incubator. So what is it? The actual website, dashincubator.app, is where you go to figure out about that whole thing. Basically, the Dash incubator is a project that will pay you task by task to do anything about developing Dash. And so there are some tasks like, hey, can you come up with a new pull request on this thing, or blah blah blah, or this. You can also create a concept from start to finish, and like you can just say, oh, I want to make a multi-coin Dash username wallet that uses Dash usernames to associate multiple different wallets for other coins. Let's get that made. You can just type out a little specification thingy or a basic concept. People will get approved, and then someone makes specifications. You can get paid for that too, and then you can actually start developing it. And every little bit of it is like bit by bit incentivized. It's a real cool thing. So that's where I would go. In fact, if you, whatever channel you're watching this on, whether it's YouTube or it's Odysee/library, I made a video about how to use the incubator, and you can go check that out. Now, that does lead me to the last question of the evening, which is not when Evo, it's when DashBoost. So, for the viewers at home who have not remembered, DashBoost was a treasury program that was like a micro treasury, right? Which is basically, it's like the masters voting on proposals to give payouts and stuff. Except it's not the masters necessarily. It's anyone with Dash could just vote, and is geared for much smaller projects. And Pasta and some other people ran that, and after, basically it wasn't funded for a while by the treasury itself, there was a time when there was some other anonymous donors who were helping fund it, but it just kind of got pushed back to, sunsetted for the moment. So basically, what are your thoughts on DashBoost and where it goes from here?
I think it can be very valuable for certain projects that are of a relatively small size.
Mm-hmm.
I actually like the incubator style more. In fact, that was kind of the original idea behind DashBoost, was to kind of have something that was more
incubator-esque.
Yeah, not as decentralized, right?
Mm-hmm.
That had a group of people, like the administrators of the incubator, who kind of are in control of the funds that it receives, and people put in specifications and requests and whatnot,
mm-hmm.
and they can get reviewed by those admins and then given out or not given out.
Yeah.
I think that kind of structure is a lot better. It's a lot less susceptible to gaming the system. Although I'm not completely against DashBoost being a thing, but
yeah. So
generally, I would like to see an incubator type system, though, for more stuff, right? For something different than just what's going on in the incubator and the development focused stuff. Yeah.
So here's an interesting thing, right? And let's see. So we got a comment from probably Hilawi here saying, "Can Pasta elaborate how non-tech Dash community members could help with Dash development? Should people learn to code, or can they contribute in some other way?" And at the end of the comment, which is kind of cut off here, he says, "Where's Ryan?" Which is a fun little in-joke, but we'll leave that for the after party. So do you know of any good ways to contribute? Obviously, the incubator, there are some ways of promoting the incubator. Actually, this is more of not necessarily a question for Pasta, but maybe for me. In the Dash incubator, there's this new project. First off, there's incubator promotion stuff. Like, I got paid to make the incubator video, the how-to video. Again, start to finish concept, even though it's not coding, right? And so you can do the same thing. There's an incubator promotion thing where you can write a blog post or do videos or whatever to promote the incubator and its work that you can get involved in there too. There's also something very new, which is there's a Dash publication, a Dash community publication on Medium that is being created that you can contribute to that publication. It's kind of like, Dash Core Group has its own, official blog via Medium and stuff, except this is for the rest of the community. And so basically you can get paid to do that too. So that's all in the incubator. I would go to the incubator, basically, is the short thing. Now, as far as like that, what my vision for DashBoost in the future would be, I do like the incubator much more than like the voting chaos that is, the regular treasury. What I would like to see happen, what I would actually expect to be happening relatively soon, like in the next several months, even though there's been any plans for this, I'm just seeing things going in a weird way where the incubator was meant to be Dash platform and build decentralized applications on Dash platform. And then little other things started kicking in, like, other development things that are not necessarily related to platform itself. And then, there's some other promo stuff. Eventually, there should be a fork of the incubator that's not for development, or not for platform development at least, that's for everything else. Like, I'm going to run a meetup and do a thing, or I'm going to do whatever else. Basically all the DashBoost stuff, but through the incubator. So basically, fork the incubator for more traditional DashBoost purposes and call it DashBoost. What do you think of that idea?
I like it. I like that. I like that indeed.
Yeah, and so the other thing is there's this project being created called Springboard, which is basically a souped up, super awesome platform-based fork of Flipstarter.cash. Bitcoin Cash has this thing called Flipstarter, which is a site or a little tool to basically allow you to crowdfund stuff, and it pays out if all the donations are met by the prescribed time. And if they aren't met by then, it automatically refunds everyone's money. And so now there's a Dash version of that called Springboard that's being made, and basically you have like usernames and stuff too, and to not be as kind of hodgepodgey, where there's an actual site that some guy finds all the flip starters out there on Bitcoin Cash and like manually inputs them all, and he asks for donations to keep doing that. It'll be a much more elegant system. So what I would love to see, obviously we have the Dash Treasury and the groups under it. I would love to see, obviously, Incubator keep working, but also DashBoost as the people's incubator, as it were, and then have Springboard there for like other one-off things, or even something like, hey, I've fallen on hard times, I lost my business because the shutdowns, or this and that, can anyone help? And you crowdfund a thing like that. Or, hey, I want to do something really cool and awesome, but it's not really Dash related, but it's something pretty cool and awesome that you could still raise money in Dash. It's not as Dash specific. So having all those things together, I think would be really great.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good idea.
Yeah. So any parting thoughts before we wrap this thing up and hit the after party?
Yeah, if you have in a desire to kind of be on that more developer side of the community, definitely try your hand at, coding up different things that you want to see happen. Right? The best way to learn how to code is to have something that you just want to get done. That's how Kodak's made it happen. He had his Spark application, and his developer ran away with all his money, and he didn't know how to code.
Yeah.
But
now he does.
He knew what he needed to do, and so he learned what he needed to learn in order to do what he wanted to do. And so the same thing applies with anyone else. When I got started with Dash Core, I did not know C++. I knew some Java. I was entry-level Java, but I knew zero C++. But guess what? I've been able to have really, really valuable contributions to Dash Core, even though I started out without knowing any C++.
Yes.
So even if you think, you don't know how to code at this point or anything like that, if you have an idea of something that you want to work on, you can figure it out. And there are people in this community that will help you and that want you to be successful in that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, I think that's good. Yeah, and also, of course, the best way to learn how to code is to lose your job as a journalist. But that's a little bit of a different pun, maybe unfair. Anyway, congratulations everyone who's been watching, especially on the Odysee live stream. We reached the conclusion of 2 podcasts in a row for the first time. I thought the chaos would be too crazy for back-to-back stuff, but hey, apparently it works. Just for that, I'm going to celebrate a little bit. I'm going to pimp this out again, CryptoGifts_EN on Twitter and Instagram. Makes these things. Here we go, my little Dash class. And this is going to be on the after party. So the after party is just like this, except it's not live. It's not broadcast. And it's a bunch of people just hanging out, old school. It'd be doing Zoom happy hours before Zoom happy hours were a thing. And yeah, we're going to be doing that. And if you want to know where to go, it's staydashy.com. Gets you to the Dash Talk Discord. Or if you're a friend or whatever who knows me and just wants to PM me on other platforms like Twitter or whatever, say, hey, how do I get into this mythical after party? Then you just start asking around and you'll get the link and we'll get you in. Thanks very much for being on, Pasta. Looking forward to all the exciting stuff.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. And I will see you guys next week.